I'm Neville Astley.
I'm Mark Baker, and we are the directors of The Big Nights, and we're going to do a director's commentary of sorts. The first thing is the little logo, which actually represents us. Round one is Neville, and the triangle one is me.
So here's the title sequence, which was a bit like a Thunderbirds get ready, get set, go sort of epic.
It's also trying to get in almost a sort of cut down version of the two trailers that are also included on this DVD in a very compressed form, in 30 seconds I think it is. One of the key lines there was that line about Sir Maurice being not the finest swordsman in the world, but the most enthusiastic, which was maybe the key to the whole of his character.
So this is, in the bottom corner is the Leica, which is a storyboard cut to the soundtrack, original soundtrack that we record. And throughout the Leica you've also got early animation tests in there as well.
We should point out this is the first episode of the series that we animated, of the 13. And what happens in our production process is that we drew all the storyboard, and then after the voices are recorded, they're cut to length. And then, as bits of animation were done, they were slotted in to this what we call the Leica. I think a few animation studios call it a Leica. A lot of people call it an animatic.
Yeah, this was the first episode we made, but I think it was about the last one we actually finished, because it took twice as long as the further episodes.
Was it 8 weeks?
Yeah, like that? Yeah. I think we planned that way because we'd never animated on computer before. Any of us were all traditional animators.
We'd never made a series before. I mean, before this, Nev and I had made short films. And so we were very worried about how we were going to do a series. And because animation tends to use up whatever time you give it, we were very worried that if we allowed the animators and ourselves to take longer than the designated time to do the first episode, we could easily spend a whole year just animating one episode.
We would have.
Yeah. And funnily enough, we gave ourselves a year to make the series, didn't we? Which was a slightly arbitrary, totally arbitrary amount of time, because we didn't know how long it would take.
We did a 10-minute film before that, which took 9 months.
Just finished a 10-minute... or maybe 14-minute for Channel 4 that had taken about a year to animate just that one episode. So for us, this was really fast, but it was really exciting as well.
Oh, come on, Boris. It's not that bad.
The BBC, who commissioned the series, were very keen for us to have famous actors. And I think they suggested Brian Blessed, and we thought, oh, that's great, he'd be fantastic as Sir Maurice, because he has that sort of loudness and bigness, and also like a real childish quality, a sort of slightly sulky quality sometimes.
But the problem was to try and find another loud voice to match, and we found David Rintoul.
When he came along to do the audition, it was just fantastic, because he was just Sir Maurice, because he had that great quality of being able to do it, play it absolutely straight against the slightly silly Brian Blessed, and yet they did feel like they could be a pair. But in my mind, I often thought of Sir Boris a bit being like Batman in a way, and it's that same sort of thing, because he is very straight and very sensible, but he says some very stupid things, but he says them with great authority.
So many important things to do. I don't think they know one end of a saucepan.
Because we were animating on computer, and these are basically puppets that we're animating, so they're built once, and then they're manipulated in the computer. We knew that as long as we had them talking and moving, this was one of our sort of worst case scenarios, that we would have some sort of series, even if the thing didn't have any backgrounds and so on. So it started off just as the characters. We built the characters in the computer as kind of jointed puppets, like two-dimensional puppets. Because we had very little pre-production, we just pretty much started, I think about 6 weeks maybe before we started production, to try and build the characters that were going to be animated.
We specifically picked traditional animators to work with us rather than computer animators, because we wanted that hand-drawn feel. And whenever there's a new character like this imp, people would play with it and see what qualities you could get out of it, and sort of see how it would move.
Yes, because it was a team of animators, what would happen is all the animators would look at what each other were doing and then pick up little bits and pieces, little mannerisms and things, and then use them themselves.
Other actors we had were Alexander Armstrong.
From Armstrong and Miller, he's done since. And that's another big voice, because we wanted this big-voiced, traditional narrator. This is actually Morwenna Banks doing the voice of the imp, all the little giggles and things. And in fact, she's doing Ethel as well, isn't she?
Yeah. And Ethel's sister is Prunella Scales.
So, you've agreed to dedicate
Nowadays,
the rest of your life
so much computer animation is done that I'm sure, it seems quite obvious that you could do something like this in computer, but when we were making this, the software was actually being developed. I mean, the cell action software that was used to make the series was being developed for the series while we were in production.
Weren't you, Morris?
And so it was brand new, and the program itself was being updated daily.
Yes. So with Ethel and the Imp, because it was the first episode, a lot of things weren't there because the programmers were actually having to work at the same speed that we were working at. And so initially, I think there wasn't even any sound, was there?
Or camera moves. Yeah.
Which is, again, one of the reasons why we had to keep going back over this episode and adding more and more bits in as not only more backgrounds were done, but also the program itself, cell action, became more, finished, and it could actually cope with what we were throwing at it. And as is always the case with these things, the more the software could do, the more we wanted it to do.
Oh, I'm riding along.
We recorded them actually like a radio play, didn't we? We actually had all the actors for the whole episode all sitting at a table with microphones so they could play off each other. Stuff we've done since, we don't tend to do that anymore because one of the problems with that is it makes it harder to concentrate on what each actor is doing. So this background would have been, as you can see, slotted in probably after we'd animated all 13 episodes actually, because we had time then to go back and make things more and more elaborate and add more and more detail. When we started making, the other thing I remember now is that the amount of props that the characters have to hold is quite incredible. So that's why it's the backgrounds that have been left to be the last thing to be done.
Also the props. Every prop had to be built and then destroyed.
Yes, exactly. We had the props, there are several versions of them, usually broken versions, burnt versions, smashed versions. So anyway, it's fantastic now that we've been able to release the whole series. It was very frustrating when the series was first finished and it came out on VHS and there were only, is it 6 episodes?
Yeah.
And there was always going to be a second VHS, but it never happened. And now there's been pretty much a 10-year gap, hasn't there, between the initial release and what's now being released. So it's fantastic to be able to get all the episodes out there.
I put an X. Excuse me, man. Oh, dear, Morris, that's
In retrospect, an awful lot of it is tremendously scary because we were making this biggest production we'd ever made before,
Come on, Morris.
with software that was actually being written while the thing was in production. We'd never made a series before, but we just got on with it, didn't we? And in fact, one of the key writing ideas in the Big Nights was the fact that each character is in a way in their own little world. They each have their own sort of view of what's going on. The Big Nights are very selfish, really. Even though they're out to right all wrongs and be knights, they very much do it because they want to do it.
Which is the reason for this episode, even because it's more about that they can't really look after themselves.
Yes, I mean, they're not very nice to Ethel, are they?
No.
And it's at the end, I mean, their reward to her is to forbid her to ever go on holiday again. And the Big Nights theme tune,
It's composed by Pete Bakey.
started off a lot more almost gypsy sounding or Arabic sounding. There's a band that Nev and I like called Les Nigres Vertes, and has that kind of real energy to it, and the first theme tune was very much like that, but we ended up adapting it and making it a bit more medieval sounding. The only problem with doing this director's commentary over an episode that's only 10 minutes long is it's quite difficult to compress all our thoughts and memories into just a 10-minute voiceover, but
I can't remember that far back.
but hopefully that's there's a few little interesting things that have never been heard before.
Yep. And petition your local MP for more episodes, and you know.
Oh yes, that's the point. Yes, there could be more episodes, couldn't there?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Neverlastly.
I'm Mark Baker. Thank you for watching.